morning. It's 11 o'clock Eastern Time, and I would like to get started by welcoming everyone to this PALS Business Excellence Institute webinar. We appreciate you investing the next 20 minutes with us to learn more about creating an effective organizational profile. My name is Clay Rolston, and I have the privilege to kick off this webinar and to introduce my business partner and our president, David McClaskey. Both David and I share a similar and distinctive career background in that we have both worked for two companies who have won the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, Eastman Chemical Company and PALS Sudden Service. And they are both headquartered right here in Kingsport, Tennessee. Hopefully, when you registered for this webinar, you understood the objectives listed here, but simply we want you to pick up some hints and tips about creating the organizational profile that lays the groundwork for an effective Baldrige assessment and helps focus the leadership team. The format for today's webinar will be a formal presentation by David McClaskey, followed by a 5-minute question and answer session where you can submit questions by entering them on your control panel. Your phone will stay on mute during the webinar. As a way of a brief background, the mission of PALS Business Excellence Institute is to help companies improve business performance through training and consulting based on the proven management practices of PALS Sudden Service and other world-class models. There are a few ways you can work with us after the webinar. Tomorrow, the webinar's slides will be located on our website blog. Just click on News and Insight button located on our homepage. Our most popular public training, Achieving World-Class Results, will be offered next on May 4th and 5th. This training will show you role model practices used by PALS Sudden Service in each of the 6 categories of the Baldrige criteria. We also offer extensive Baldrige training and consulting that uses the depth of our experience to minimize management frustration with the Baldrige process, as well as waste and frustration that can be involved with application rewrites. Our lean public training is another popular route where companies not only learn lean principles, but they see firsthand how they have been integrated into PALS culture and operations. Of course, you can always get in touch with us through our Contact Us on our website or by my email address, which is shown here. To begin the content portion this morning, it is my privilege to introduce David McClaskey. We are fortunate at PALS BEI to not only have the platform of PALS world-class management systems, but to have a president and leader who's helped 7 companies win 8 Baldrige Awards, and that's about 10% of all the winners. These companies happen to include the 2010 winner and multi-year client of PALS BEI, A&M Management. David is also the 2010 recipient of the highest Individual Achievement Award from the Tennessee Center for Performance Excellence. So I will leave the rest of today's program in the very capable hands of David McClaskey. David?
Thank you, Clay. I appreciate that. And would like to just jump right into it. And here's the outline we're going to use to accomplish the objectives that Clay outlined. And the first thing we're going to cover is the organizational profile, what is it and its purpose. And we're assuming a certain amount of background to it, or I'll give you references to how to get more background on it. Then we're going to spend the heart of the presentation on 5 keys to keeping your organizational profile simple but effective. And then lastly, we'll spend a few minutes on how can you use the organizational profile to most effectively focus your company's executive team on what is important. So let's start with the first objective. Organizational profile, what is it, and its purpose. Quite simply stated, the organizational profile lists what are the key organizational characteristics. Baldrige prescribes the particular characteristics it wants described because these are the ones that are most important in assessing a management system. Now, it's important in an organizational profile to know its purpose. It's not just a random list. And this is key to everything else we're going to be talking about. It really sets the stage for you telling somebody who doesn't know anything about your company what is most important to your organization's success, which is then the key to the Baldrige assessment. Let's go on to the second objective, where we want to spend most of our time. 5 keys to keeping your organizational profile simple but effective. Here are the 5 keys, and I'm going to go through each one of those individually and talk a little about them. Now, certainly, what I haven't mentioned is you need to respond to each question that's asked. These are the things that make those responses high quality versus things that might even work against you. So let's talk about the first one. Focus on the vital few most important parts of the organizational profile. When we look at the organizational profile, we see a lot of detail it's asked for. But there's only certain parts of the organizational profile that are really fairly significant. They would be the vital few, the 20% that has the 80% of the impact. Then what you'd find, like most things, the 80% only has the 20% of the impact. So what are those 20% that has the 80% of the impact? Well, here they are specifically. These are referenced by the specific things that are asked for by Baldrige in the organizational profile. And so here's actually the references and the name of the title of the section. Now, some of these sections, only part of it is what's important, but I've listed the whole section title to avoid confusion. Now, you can look at the Baldrige criteria to actually make this reference make sense if you don't have a criteria in front of you or have one in your possession. They are free, and you can get them at this website address. So if you go to the www.nist.gov/Baldrige, on the right-hand side, there'll be the click on the criteria. It's a free Adobe Acrobat download. It'll download to your computer. It is not copyrighted. So it's available to everybody. And I hope if you don't have one, I hope you will get one. So now that we've talked about which are the most important sections to concentrate on, let's go to the second hint. It's the whole purpose of an organizational profile is to help examiners decide what is and is not important to your organization. So you have to write that with that in mind. Now, let me give an example. Let's say you're in a product where speed is very important to your customers. You need to make sure, if we're talking about, and I'll give as an example, the customers and the key customer requirements. So one of the key customer requirements would be speed. You've got to make sure that the examiners know that speed is very important, and that's very clear in terms of what you've described in not only the key customer requirements, but maybe other aspects of the organizational profile. The fact that it's not mentioned, other things are not mentioned, would say they're not important. So what you are is describing the vital few things, not everything that's important, but the vital few things that are most important for the organization to know, the examiners or your management to know that's important to your organization. As we go to the third key point, and it's writing your application so it points toward your strengths and away from your weaknesses. Now, there's certainly limits of what you can and cannot do with this. Let me give some examples. If, let's say, speed was important, you could write the organizational profile, and it could say something like, speed is the most important characteristic to our customers. Now, if in reality you're not very good at speed, you're average or maybe even a little below average, what you've just said to the examiners and to anybody that's reading it is that the most important thing to customer requirements you're average or worse at. It's a very bad way to context that. Now, you can't deny that speed's important. That would be inappropriate. But you don't have to context it in the organizational profile as the most important thing. In that case, in the case that you're not very good at it, I would list it as one of a list. And in this case, the longer the list, the better, so that it gets to be diffused terms of now it's one of 8 things that are important to customers, but your organizational profile hasn't singled any 1 or 2 of them out, and certainly hasn't singled speed out as the most important variable that we have. Now, on the other hand, if you're really good at speed, you're the benchmark, you are world class, nobody has been able to match your levels of speed, then you very much want to use the superlatives that speed is the most important characteristic to our customers, assuming that's a true statement. So how you context with adjectives can very much shape how someone sees your application, assesses your application, because what you'd really like is the things that are most important to your customers and are most important to your strategic plans and most important to you overcoming competitive challenges are the things that you're best at, and you can show that you're in the top 10% or better. So proper use of adjectives is really important in this process. So that's pointing towards your strengths and away from your weaknesses. Now, going to number 4, you need to keep each section as simple as possible. A list of maybe 4 key requirements. If those are the ones that are most vital, you should just keep the list of 4 and not make it 8 or 10. Because everything that you mentioned as a key characteristic has to be followed through with in terms of we need to know how we're doing. There's measures of it, processes for it, training for it, and most importantly, it's integrated with everything else it needs to be integrated with. So you can imagine trying to integrate 4 things is complex enough. Trying to integrate 8 key things could be almost impossible. And what you've done is expose yourself to a number of holes that shouldn't have happened if you would have said, well, these are the 4 that are most important. And therefore, that's the stuff we've really concentrated on. So once you have all the various sections and the write-up needs to harmonize together, you can't just talk about 4 or 5 different processes like you have. It's very classic that people with mission, vision, values, core competencies, key customer requirements, and you can't relate to any of them. And key things that make that you're strategically advantaged on, and then you can't relate those things together. They just seem like different walls. And what happens is it looks like an example that you might have circuits, different types of circuits, but they're all just laying on the table. None of them are plugged into the computer. So even though each circuit could be world-class, they're totally useless toward your mission. They really have to be integrated and working together and harmonized, and it's the flow between them that actually creates the value. So remember, it's almost impossible to get that kind of flow if you describe too complex of an environment in the first place. So I think the real key to the organizational profile is to make sure you concentrate on the vital few and don't get down to the trivial many. Lastly, during the organizational profile, it's not asked for explicitly, but you should put it in. Why is it, particularly if you're going for Baldrige or you're going for any sort of award, or even if you're just doing an internal assessment, you need to state why it is either you should win if you're going for award, or what is it that you're particularly proud of. Just state we are the very best at speed. Nobody is able to reach this level of return business in our industry. Nobody has a reliability record or a safety record like we have. So state the superlatives and think of this like the opening argument in a trial. You can imagine an attorney talking to the jury and saying, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is why you ought to have a ruling that's favorable to my client. So he outlines the case, and then during the trial, hopefully supports that argument. Well, you're doing the same thing. The organizational profile is that opening argument. This is what's important. And then the rest of the application, including the rest of the organizational profile, should support that contention. So that is that's the case. Well, I've gone over the 5 cases. I want to spend just a minute on talking about effectively using the profile to help focus your company's executive team on what's important. And this comes around 2 things. One is writing down these key things, particularly the vital few things in the organizational profile, writing them down and having the entire executive team and having them operationally defined and having the entire executive team agree to not only the letter but the spirit. So it doesn't matter who you're talking to. Related to those key things in the organizational profile, every one of them would say the exact same the exact same thing with the exact same tone, with the exact same intent. And when they don't, the organizational profile writing process properly denotes this is a subject that should be discussed until the executive team has come to harmony, and not by compromise. They've really said, what are we really here for? What's really important to our customers? What are our real strategic advantages? And any other thing that they need to iron out. So they're all of one mind. You'll find if you use the organizational profile for that purpose, it really helps to accelerate the company's efforts. Well, at this point, we're ready to go to some questions and answers. And to try this, we're going to go ahead and see if you'll write your questions in, and then I will read the question and answer it. So let's talk about questions. Okay. Okay. So the first one would be, what have you seen in all of the applicants that you've had, which is some of the biggest problems with the organizational profile? And the one that I see the most is that people make it too complex. They don't use the Pareto principle. They write far too much, and then they don't support their contentions. This then creates a lot of problems and makes it almost impossible, and even more so, it doesn't keep one focused on improving the vital few. It gets things way down the rabbit trail. So keeping it focused, keeping it simple on what the vital few is, and what you'll find when you have it right, you also have the simplest application. The next question we have is, can this process work in a government environment? And yes, it can. I've worked with many government agencies of just about every type. We could talk everything from the Army and the Navy to the school boards to United Way to city government to state government to universities. And in essence, what you find is it's even more important in those environments because there's less agreement on who the key customers are, what are their requirements, what are those vital few requirements, and what are the measures of those vital few requirements that make such a difference. So what I find is the organizational profile process particularly is almost got like a 5X value in government and nonprofits because they really haven't sharpened the focus as much as profits have on why are they really here and what really makes a difference. So a very, very valuable type of situation. Next question is, what are the advantages in the marketplace does a company have when it is a Baldrige winner? And I think that's a very, very good question. And I think to some extent it depends on whether you're a consumer company or not, like a Ritz-Carlton or something like that, versus an industry company where name recognition is not going to get you any more business. And basically, I think the advantage is not in the winning. The advantage is what you had to do to be role model. Because to win the Baldrige Award, you had to be role model in the things that are most important to you and most important to achieving your mission and most important to your customers. So basically, I think the most important part of it is the journey. So by the time you've won, most of the benefit has arrived in the journey to getting to the winning, and the winning is the recognition that you have reached the level where you can be one of the best users of the assets that are under your stewardship to accomplish your mission. Well, I think our time is just about up, and I'm going to turn it back to Clay here for a closing.
Thank you, David. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be asked to complete a brief survey, and I would just like to request that you give us some feedback on the webinar and let us know if we can help you in any of the 4 ways that we had mentioned that are on the screen now, if we can help you in any of the ways listed here. So on behalf of David and I, we would like to thank you again for investing your time with PALS EEI, and we wish you a very pleasant day. Goodbye.